What's up, guys? Are you an investor investing in angel and seed stage rounds? Or maybe you're a founder who's raising a angel or seed round, at which point you might actually be using these things called convertible notes. Now, the thing is, they're not actually as simple as you think they are. In fact, there's actually three ways at which you can actually convert your notes at your next big round. Now, if that's revelation to you, stay with me and we're going to go through all the three methods, and I'm going to teach you a little bit about how the convertible notes will actually be converting. Okay, cool. Stick with me right now.
Ask Alex. Ask Alex. Because you don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know, now you know.
Yeah.
Now, the first thing you want to do is to head over to alexanderjarvis.com. I'll put a link below for you to be able to find that. And you want to download this free calculator for you. And then you can actually have a play around with yourself and actually see how things work. And that's really the best way to learn. So I'll teach you conceptually what happens, but really you're going to really want to go through this model, maybe read the blog which is on, and get a better understanding about how this all sort of really works. But let's just kick off into it now. So first thing you want to do is read this notes page, because there's a couple of things that you're going to want to do which people always mess up. So what you're going to want to do is click on File and then go to Options, which is down here, or Alt-T-O if you are on a PC, and click on Formulas. And you can see here that mine are set to automatic and that I've enabled iterative calculations. Now, if you don't click on this, it's not going to work and there'll be an error and you'll try and contact me and complain. I'll probably ignore you. Just turn it on and the model will work. It's just that simple, okay? Finally, if things go wrong and things blow up effectively, it's easier just to close the model and just open it up again. So just don't save the model, or you save a new version of this model so you can always open up a clean one, okay? Because if you do some silly things, sometimes it can blow up, but just FYI. All right, this is a very useful sheet for you to understand the differences between the three notes. So we can see here that impact on founders, the pre-money method is the best for founders. However, for investors, you guys, it's actually the worst. Whereas the impact on a percentage ownership method is the worst for founders, but it's best for investors. The dollars invested method, which is the third one, is more of a middle of the road agreement between all of you to make everyone equally unhappy. So read this. It's actually going to teach you exactly what's happening. Now, you can read faster than I can talk, and I don't want to be a parrot. So just have a read of this, and you'll learn quite a lot. Now, here we have a comparison sheet, which actually shows you the percentage ownership differences and the valuation differences between the three methods. So we can see here, for ownership, we talked about pre-money being the best. Well, founders, under the made up assumptions I put in, would own 60%, whereas in the percentage ownership basis, they'd only own 55.7. And then for the convertible note holders, the percentage ownership method would be the best at 14.3. With Series A investors, they were investing 20%, but on the pre-money basis, they wouldn't be getting that full 20%. On the dollars invested method, it'll be a bit more in the middle of the road. And why is this ownership changing? Well, the valuations are different. So we can see your post money as a founder is going to be 11.4-ish million, whereas on the dollars invested method, it would be 11, and the percentage ownership method would be lower at 10. So something's obviously happening to be changing these valuations so that the ownership percentages end up being different. Now, we've got three sheets to look at here. 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go through each one of them. But if quickly, you might notice if we look here and we look here, that these are some of the biggest numbers you might notice fundamentally changing, right? So you want to focus in on those. So let's look at pre-money method. The assumptions that we have for all these three models are exactly the same so that you can see the exact differences between them. So we're assuming that you're getting a pre-money valuation, which is 8 million, and the investors investing 2 million. Now, you'd normally think that 8 plus 2 equals 10 is your post-money valuation, However, there are other things happening here because we have a convertible note, and that's going to be impacting on your post-money valuation. And we can see that on this case, on the pre-money basis, that is actually that 10 you thought. But on the dollars invested, it's actually 11. So what's happening here is the most interesting thing to pick up about these convertible notes, right? Here we have the pre-money plus the investment plus the notes, assuming the discount here, which is used. So that means that your post-money valuation is much higher. What does that mean? Well, the post-money valuation being higher is best for founders, but it's worse for investors. We can see that ownership-wise, that's the best one for founders, but it's the worst one for convertible note holders. So what's really happening is depends on what you're adding up here. So we can see here that we are including that number. Now, the angel investors have put in $1 million, and the terms that they negotiated with the founders was that there'd be a 30% discount, there would be a 7 million cap, and those are primarily the important economic terms that you're going to have in a convertible note, right? For each of these notes, they're the same. You need to be able to calculate things on a per share basis. So I'm assuming that before investment, before you have an ESOP, there is a million number of shares, which are going to be owned by the founders. We can see here, shares equals 100,000. Sorry, 1 million shares are owned by the founders. Whenever you raise a large round, a Series A, investors always will make you have an ESOP. And that could be something, anything between 10 to even maybe 20%. Really, you should never really have more than a 15% ESOP pool. And you'd want to keep those numbers as small as possible. But for the purpose of this model, we've assumed it's 10%. Now, clause for convertible note overhang. I'm not going to go into this right now because it's quite technical and I don't need to explain it in the video for this purposes. I have a blog on convertible note terms that you don't understand, which you need to read, which I'll put in the link below. And for the purposes for the Series A investors, they're getting a liquidation preference of 1x, which is linked to that conversion note overhang, because sometimes investors or angel investors can end up with more of a liquidation preference than they paid for. And that's effectively what this is highlighting here. So when you have a discount and a cap, investors basically get to choose which one is more advantageous for them. So you'll see here that the discount is being used, but if we have a cap of say 2 million, the cap would be used, right? But in this case, the 30% discount is more advantageous for the angel investors, and so that's the one they're going to take. That would imply their investment value is 1.428 million, right? Whereas the cap is worth 1.142, so naturally investors want that one than that one because it's bigger. And so we're going to add this number to your post-money valuation under the pre-money method. One useful thing as a founder to think about is pre-money is bad, post-money is good. Whereas for investors, post-money is bad, pre-money is good. And so if, as a founder, if people are trying to put money into pre-money, such as increasing the size of the option pool, it's called the pre-money shuffle, that's bad for you. But as an investor, shove as much into the pre as you can, get away with it anyway. So we know these formulas that the cap is better than the discount, and so therefore the investor's going to take these. Now, we're taking the post-money valuation, and which we're going to then get down to the pre-money valuation, as well as something called the effective pre-money valuation. So under the pre-money basis, we're going to end up getting to the pre-money of 8. So we're going to deduct the investment of 2. We're going to deduct the convertible note of 1.4, and then you end up at an 8 million pre-money. Now, we need to deduct the ESOP because you're going to create that in the pre. And so what we're effectively taking is the number of shares you have times by the price per share, and that tells you the number of shares that you'd have in order to be at that number. Now, when we deduct that ESOP, you're going to get to what your effective pre-money valuation is. So investors will always talk about the pre-money valuation as a founder, you want to be thinking about the effective pre-money because of the impact on that ESOP, right? 6.8 is less than 8. That's not good for founders. Now, the ESOP, we know, the investors have asked 10%, and that goes in the pre. So because you're going to get diluted by the convertible notes and the Series A investment of $2 million, you will need to create an ESOP pool before, and that will also get diluted by that new investment. So that effectively means that you need to have a 14.3% size of a pool in order to have 10% post the investment and the convertible note transaction. Here, I'm mentioning this convertible note overhang. It's a little bit nerdy and complicated. But under these assumptions, we've seen that yes, there is a overhang. There would be one of 0.43. But because you added a clause, this wouldn't matter anymore. So what you want to do is make sure that your investors put in a clause that there is not going to be liquidation preference overhang as a founder. An example of that is in the blog, which I mentioned. Now, to calculate the price per share, what we're doing is we're taking the pre-money valuation and dividing it by the total number of shares, which is the 1 million shares the founders originally had, plus the new ESOP, which equals 1.116, right? So you divide that pre-money divided by the total number of shares, we get you the Series A price. Now, for the calculation for the convertible notes, what we do is on a discount basis, it's 1 minus 30%, so 70% of 686 gets you to 4.8. On the convertible note with a cap, there's some little math here, which effectively tells you 7 over 8 times by 6.86 gets you to $6 per share, which is better for angel investors, and that's why they pick that, right? Then we'll see that when we look pre-investment and post-investment, the ESOP is created before the investment is made. So founders are diluted now to 85.7% already. 14.3% created as a pool for your staff. Interesting to note is if you do not issue all of those shares or grant those options to employees, if you exit, so fairly, everyone will get the benefit of that and you won't get it all back, which is totally not fair, but it just seems to be the way that it is. Now, a post-investment, the founders own the same number of shares as they did. The ESOP in number of shares is the same, but we are adding the angel investors onto the cap table, then they're using a discount, and the Series A investors are being added on as well. To do that, all you're doing is dividing the $2 million investment they had, divided by the price per share that they had, and that tells you how many shares they have. In this case, what you're effectively saying is 1 million over 6 is going to get us to the 208,000, blah, blah. What does that happen to founders? Well, ownership is now 60% for founders, 12.5% is going to be for the angel investors, and the Series A guys are getting 17.5. And we can see that the ESOP is now 10%. Sorry, Siri's trying to have a conversation with me. It's really annoying. Is now at 10%, as we said it was. So, holy heck, the founders owned 100% before, 85%, 0.57% after the ESOP, and now they're down to 60. So fundraising is really painful and dilutive for founders. So this one is the best example for founders. So we can see here that they've got 60%. Percentage ownership is 55.7, and then the dollars invested basis, they are at 58.8. So as a founder, this is the one that you would want to have. As an investor, not so much. Now, the percentage ownership method, what we just do is we take the math as you would normally assume it to be. It's just simply the 8 plus 2 gets you to 10. All the assumptions are exactly the same as we had previously. Now, under this basis, the discount is again attractive to the convertible note holders. We can actually see that the investment value is always the same in each case for them. Now, in our deduction to get to our pre-money, we can see that it's 10 million now, not 11.42, because the 11.42 was including the value of the angel investors. We deduct that angel investment, We deduct the 1.428 for the angel investors, and that gets us to 6.571. But why is this so much lower? Well, it's because we didn't include the 1.4 in the post money. See? The post money is higher. It's lower here because it's not included in the post money. So this gets us to 6.5. We're going to deduct $1 million or valuation for the ESOP, which gets us to 5.571, which again is a lot lower. Under this basis, the price per share for the Series A is 5.57. Discount, you're making 70% of that for that. And for the convertible note, again, you're just taking the fractional ownership they'd have against the Series A price to get them to their share price. So on this basis, with the ESOP, your pre-funding pool is going to be 15.2% as opposed to 14.3%. So that is implying that the ESOP is going to be more dilutive than it was before, which is exactly true, because you can see you're issuing more shares to the ESOP. So the founders are fundamentally getting diluted more. Now on this basis, the founders end up with 55.7. The convertible note holders have 14.3, which is about 2% higher. And the Series A guys get exactly what they thought they were getting with 2/10, it's just 20%. The ESOP is 10%, as we always said it would be. Now, here we can see the founders at 55.7. This method is a lot more dilutive. Finally, if you're having a discussion and negotiation of this, assuming you're now aware of how this works, you might come together and use the dollars invested method. Although that's going to be a negotiation you're going to have with your first your Series A investors and then with the angel investors. But bear in mind, Series A investors typically have more clout, and so angel investors might end up having to do what the VCs say. So the dollars invested method is not including, so 11, the interest which is being accrued on the convertible note. So it's at we're only adding 1 million, not anymore. So we're at 11 million here as opposed to 10 or 11.428. So that post money is less than the pre-money basis, but it's higher than the percentage ownership basis. So we can also see that the starting point for our derivation to get to pre-money is higher than it would be for the percentage ownership method basis. So once we make our deductions, we end up in the middle of the road between both of the pre-money and percentage ownership methods that we talked about. Now, again, the discount is used. We can calculate what our price per shares are, and we can see the ownership structures. So here, founders are at 58.8, angels are at 13, and the Series A guys are at 18.2. Hopefully, if you understand, but I had to figure this out, so it took me quite a while, where you're putting in the money into the post money will really impact on what your pre-money looks like. And so it's all the fancy stuff is where it's going in that post money first. So if you can get your head around that concept, this all becomes a hell of a lot easier to understand. But let's just have a play so I can show you how you might fill this in yourself. Let's say you're really rocking it and you're raising at a 35 million pre-money valuation. And since you're doing that, you're raising a lot more money. Say you're raising at 10 million. Everyone likes roundish numbers. Oopsies, 10, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. This basis, we would be at a $50 million post. And let's chuck these into the other sheets so we can see what they look like too. We're going to change the assumptions. 46 million, 45 million, 50 million. Now the convertible notes, I think the assumptions make sense to be at $1 million here. So let's just quickly look at what's actually happened here. Founders will own 60%, up to 56.7 it would be the lowest case. Convertible note holders have around more 10%. And on a percentage ownership method basis, the Series A guy would be at 22.2, or 20 or 21% here now. So the valuations are considerably higher, ultimately impacting the angel investors who have less ownership than in the previous situations. But maybe you say, do you know what? Actually, including interest is something that was more like $2 million. What does that look like? Well, on this basis, I'm going to change these all to 2. Angel investors end up having quite more similar ownership, or almost exactly the same ownership as the Series A investors. Your discount rate, you can easily just change to say 20%. And on this basis, we can see that the cap is far more advantageous because the investment value is 10 as opposed to 2.5 million. And so here's the first time we're saying now the cap is actually more advantageous because the price per share here, 5.9, is considerably lower than the 23.6 that they would if they were actually having a discount. If you want to change the ESOP to a higher number because you're getting a bit more screwed on that, then you can. Calculations will eventually work. And we can see now that the pool you need to make in order to have 15% on this basis is 23.6. That's pretty stonkingly high, right? These don't matter so much. This is more of me educating you about these key terms. But if you say, this final one, like your number of shares you had is higher, it was like 3.560 or whatever. You can see that the founders had 3.56 million shares. So things don't really matter that much. All it's going to do is make these numbers fundamentally higher, and the ownership will be the same. So you can see the only thing that changes is the number of shares everyone has is just higher. Okay, so guys, that's how you use this model. If you want to understand some of this stuff in more detail, read the blogs, which I'm linking to. Otherwise, download this model, have a play, and you'll get a much better comprehension of the impact of all this. But just really remember, the biggest difference is going to be the impact on your post-money valuation. And if you can really get your head around that, all of this just becomes a lot more simple. But have a play, compare things, look at these sheets to see the effect on various ownerships, and make sure to read this to really understand what's happening and remember which one's better or which one's worse in your situation. Any questions, sound out in the comments below, and I'd love to hear from you. Okay, bye guys, keep hustling.